power corrupts. But what happens when that power flows from an ancient, mystical energy field that binds the galaxy together? The answer is the Sith, a legacy of darkness that shaped galactic history for thousands of years. The story of the Sith doesn't begin with monsters or demons. It begins with Jedi, the guardians of peace and justice, who served the light side of the Force, roughly 7,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. The Jedi Order faced its greatest internal crisis. A faction within the Jedi ranks had grown increasingly frustrated with the limitations of their teachings. They wanted more. They craved knowledge the Jedi Council had forbidden, and they hungered for a kind of power the light side could never offer. These rebellious Jedi eventually broke away from the Order in what came to be known as the Second Great Schism. But this wasn't a peaceful departure. These rogue Jedi dove deep into forbidden dark side practices, ones that horrified their former brothers and sisters. They experimented with Sith alchemy, genetic mutations, and rituals that twisted the very essence of life itself. They turned their backs on the Jedi code of peace and serenity, embracing passion and strength instead. Among these fallen Jedi were names that would become legendary in darkside history. Ajunta Paul, a powerful warrior driven by ambition. Kanz's Muir, a master of forbidden techniques. And Zaxxon, whose understanding of the dark side was unmatched. These dark Jedi believed that true power came from conflict, that through struggle the strongest would rise and the weak would be left behind. This philosophical divide led to war, a brutal conflict known as the 100-Year Darkness. For decades, the Dark Jedi and their followers fought the Jedi Order across countless worlds. The scale of destruction was unlike anything the Republic had ever seen. The Dark Jedi unleashed monstrous creations forged through their twisted alchemy. Living weapons of war that terrorized entire systems and pushed the Jedi to their limits. But in the end, the Dark Jedi lost. The final confrontation happened at the Battle of Korbos, around 6,900 years before Yavin. There, the Jedi defeated the rebels decisively. But instead of executing them, the Republic chose what they thought was mercy. They stripped the fallen Jedi of their weapons and possessions, loaded them onto unarmed ships, and exiled them beyond Republic space. This act of mercy would change galactic history forever. These exiles drifted through the unknown regions for weeks until they discovered a remote world called Korriban, and what they found there changed everything. Korriban was home to a primitive red-skinned species known as the Sith. These beings had a natural connection to the dark side of the Force, although they understood it only as magic. The fallen Jedi saw an opportunity. Using their powers, they presented themselves as gods, overwhelming the Sith people with displays of power. The Sith worshipped them, and the Dark Jedi took control of their civilization. Over time, the exiled Jedi began to intermarry with the native Sith, blending cultures and knowledge to create something entirely new. The strongest among them, Ajunta Paul, declared himself the first Dark Lord of the Sith. He established the Sith Order, a new empire built upon dark side principles. And from then on, these fallen Jedi weren't just Dark Jedi anymore. They were Sith Lords. The Sith Empire was born, with its capital on Korriban and another major center on the nearby world of Zeost. Conflict became the heart of Sith philosophy, the belief that only through struggle could one truly grow. This idea would remain central to Sith teachings for millennia. Their society was built around a strict hierarchy, with the Dark Lord at the top and Sith Lords beneath him, each commanding their own territories and followers. Competition was encouraged, but rebellion against the Dark Lord meant death. It was a world where power was everything, and compassion was considered weakness. For the next 1,000 years, the Sith Empire grew in isolation, hidden from the Republic. They built temples, armies, and training academies, all dedicated to the dark side. Their architecture reflected their philosophy, towering, fearsome, awe-inspiring. During this expansion, some Sith Lords rose to near-mythical status. One of the most feared was Tulok Hord, a master of lightsaber combat and Sith sorcery, who conquered countless systems and brought the planet, Dromond Kars, into Sith control. By around 5,100 years before Yavin, the Sith Empire had reached what historians call its Golden Age, a time of unmatched power and prosperity. And at the center of this era stood one man, Dark Lord Marka Ragnos. Ragnos wasn't just powerful in the Force and deadly in combat. He was a master manipulator. He reigned for over a century, an almost unheard of achievement in Sith history. His genius was in understanding the nature of the Sith. He didn't suppress their ambition, he used it. Ragnos would pit rivals against one another, rewarding the strong while eliminating threats to his rule. Under Ragnos, the Sith expanded their territory, developed new dark side abilities, and amassed great wealth. Though the native red-skinned Sith species were becoming rarer due to interbreeding, their traits remained strong in the ruling class. But nothing lasts forever. Around 5000 BBY, Marka Ragnos died. His death created a dangerous power vacuum. Two powerful Sith Lords emerged to claim his mantle. The first was Naga Sado, an ambitious visionary who wanted the Empire to expand aggressively. The second was Ludo Kresh, a traditionalist who believed the Empire should consolidate and avoid overreaching. At Ragnos' funeral, their rivalry erupted. The two drew their lightsabers and dueled in front of the assembled Sith Lords. But then, something extraordinary happened. The spirit of Marka Ragnos appeared. He warned them that their feud risked everything the Sith had built. The future held great potential, he said, but also grave danger. Then he vanished. The duel ended, but the conflict didn't. The Sith Empire stood at a crossroads. After thousands of years of isolation, the outside galaxy was about to rediscover them, and the consequences would be catastrophic. Just then, fate intervened in the form of a wrong turn. It was 5000 BBY. The Sith Empire was at its height. Hidden from the galaxy, it had perfected the dark arts, prepared in secret, and waited. That moment arrived when a Republic scout ship accidentally dropped out of hyperspace near Korriban. Aboard were the Derrigan siblings, Gav and Jory, explorers looking for new trade routes. Instead, they found a hidden empire built on darkness. The Sith captured them immediately. Most of the Sith Lords wanted to execute them as spies. But Naga Sado saw an opportunity. Locked in a power struggle with Kresh, Sado used the situation to his advantage. He secretly helped the Derrigans escape, then staged an attack, making it look like the Republic had launched a rescue mission. It worked. Sado presented himself as the wartime leader the Empire needed. He claimed the Republic had discovered the Sith and was preparing for war. He argued that the only solution was to strike first. Ludo Kresh saw through the deception. But before he could act, Sado struck first, attacking Kresh's forces and seemingly killing him. With Kresh out of the way, Sado became the new Dark Lord. He let Jory Derrigon escape back to Republic space, tracking her ship to find the coordinates of key Republic worlds. Then he launched the greatest Sith invasion the galaxy had ever seen. Sado knew the Sith were outnumbered, so he used his greatest weapon, battle meditation. From a special meditation sphere, he used Sith sorcery to create illusions, multiplying the size of his fleet and spreading confusion and fear among Republic forces. When the invasion began, it hit dozens of planets at once. Coruscant, Kurik, key Republic systems fell under siege. And at first, it looked like the Sith would win. But two things changed the tide. First, the Jedi rallied. Though they'd never faced Sith like these, they quickly learned to counter Sith tactics and dark side illusions. Second, Gav betrayed Sado, horrified by the Sith brutality. Gav infiltrated Sado's meditation sphere and attacked him, breaking his concentration. The illusions shattered. Republic forces realized many of the Sith ships were just phantoms. Their morale surged, and they launched a massive counterattack. Sado ordered a retreat, but when he returned to Sith space, he found another surprise. Ludocresh had survived and seized control in his absence. The two fleets clashed, and Sado destroyed Kresh's flagship. But before Sado could stabilize his rule, Republic warships arrived in orbit, surrounded by both Republic forces and internal enemies. Sado fled to the nearby Denari system. There, using forbidden dark-side techniques, he would make one final, desperate move to escape and preserve what remained of the Sith legacy. Using ancient Sith techniques, Nagasado caused one of the stars in the Denari system to go supernova. The resulting explosion wiped out part of the Republic fleet that had been pursuing him and created just enough chaos for Sado to escape, barely. He fled with only a handful of loyal Massassi warriors, leaving behind the might of a shattered Sith Empire. Nagasado retreated to a remote moon deep in the jungle-covered system of Yavin 4. There, surrounded by thick vegetation and isolation, he went into hiding. The once powerful Dark Lord of the Sith had become little more than a refugee, preserving what little he could of Sith knowledge, and waiting, hoping for a second chance that would never come in his lifetime. Back in Sith space, the Republic showed no mercy. They launched a full-scale assault, determined to wipe the Sith out completely. One by one, they hunted down and destroyed every Sith stronghold they could find. Korriban, Ziost, and other core worlds of the Sith Empire fell in rapid succession. The Jedi, having witnessed firsthand just how dangerous the Sith could be, were relentless in their campaign. Their mission was clear: eliminate the Sith threat entirely. The native Sith species, already dwindling in numbers after centuries of interbreeding with the human Dark Jedi, were nearly wiped out. Those who survived the onslaught were forced into hiding or scattered to remote, uncharted worlds. The grand temples and academies that had stood for over 1,000 years were left in ruins, reduced to lifeless stone or buried under the desert sands by the time the Republic withdrew. Confident the job was done, the Sith Empire, the same one that had once rivaled the Republic in strength, was gone. The year 5000 BBY marked the complete collapse of the first great Sith civilization. In the Republic's eyes, it was a final victory. They believed the Sith were finished, extinct. Historical records from that era even refer to the complete extinction of the Sith Order. But the dark side is not so easily extinguished. Unknown to the Republic, one Sith Lord had never joined Nagasado's invasion, and he had also survived the Jedi's purging of Sith space. His name was Vitiate, a powerful Sith sorcerer, quiet and calculating. During the chaos of the Great Hyperspace War, Vitiate remained hidden. He watched from the shadows as the Sith Empire fell apart. And when it became clear that the Sith were doomed, he made his move. He sent out a signal, a call to all surviving Sith Lords. He promised them a way to escape the Republic and rebuild their strength. Hundreds of Sith answered the call. They gathered on the planet Nathema, where Vitiate promised to perform a ritual that would save them all. But what he delivered was a betrayal even darker than anything Naga Sado had ever dared. Once the Sith Lords were assembled, Vitiate enacted a ritual of unimaginable scale and horror. He linked every one of them into a dark side network, then drained their life force completely. In a single moment, he killed every living thing on the planet. Not just the Sith Lords, but every plant, every animal, every microbe. All life on Nathema was gone. This ritual accomplished two terrible things. First, it granted Vitiate near limitless power. It sustained his life for centuries, giving him a form of virtual immortality. Second, it severed the planet's connection to the Force itself. Nathema became a dead world, a void one that Force sensitives instinctively avoided. It helped hide the dark ritual from the Jedi. Now transformed and empowered, the Sith Lord took on a new name, Darth Vitiate, with his newfound power. He gathered the last few Sith who had not been part of his horrific ritual. Around 4,900 BBY, he led them into the unknown regions, far beyond the reach of Republic space. There, on the storm-racked world of Dramond Kars, a planet once conquered by the ancient Sith Lord Tulak horde, Darth Vitiate began constructing a new Sith Empire in total secrecy. He proclaimed himself the Sith Emperor and promised his followers that one day they would return, stronger than ever, and crush the Republic. But this time, things would be different. Unlike the first Sith Empire, which had been plagued by endless infighting and betrayal, Vitiate ruled absolutely. There were no rivals, no internal power struggles. His word was law, and his life extended far beyond that of any mortal, made him an unchallengeable force. For the next 1,500 years, this hidden Sith Empire developed in total isolation. They built cities, temples, academies. They trained new generations. In the dark side, their technology advanced in secret, far from the eyes of the Republic and the Jedi, and all the while, the wider galaxy remained convinced that the Sith were extinct, nothing more than ancient history. The Jedi eventually grew complacent. The Republic returned to politics and peacetime governance. They forgot the hard-won lessons of the Great Hyperspace War. But in the darkness beyond the stars, the Sith had not forgotten. They had not forgiven. And they had not stopped growing stronger. The war had ended with the apparent destruction of the Sith, but that illusion only drove them deeper underground, where they could thrive unnoticed. And darkness, as it always does, grows strongest. In the shadows, the legacy of the Sith endured, preserved by Darth Vitiate and his loyal followers. They waited, they watched, they prepared. Meanwhile, far from Dramand Kars, the legacy of Naga Sado also lingered. On Yavin 4, Sado and his Masasi followers built massive stone temples and conducted dark-side experiments. Though Sado would eventually die in exile, the power he left behind remained, buried in the jungle moon, dormant, patient, waiting for someone to rediscover its secrets. The collapse of the first Sith Empire in 5000 BBY wasn't the end of the Sith, it was merely the end of a chapter. The dark side would always find new vessels, new ambitions to feed on, and new opportunities to challenge the light. The Sith would return again and again, each time having learned from their past failures, for the legacy of the Sith is not built on stability or peace. It is built on destruction and rebirth. The fall of the Sith Empire was just another step in that endless cycle, and while the Republic celebrated their victory, they remained blind to the truth. The greatest Sith threat was still out there, growing in the darkness beyond the edges of their maps, biding its time. The Sith legacy awakens. Just because darkness seems defeated doesn't mean it's truly gone. More often than not, it simply retreats underground, waiting. After the Sith Empire fell, its legacy didn't die. It was buried like a seed, waiting for the right person to dig it up and breathe life into it again. That person was a Jedi Knight named Freedon Nad. After the Great Hyperspace War, the galaxy assumed the Sith were finished. For 400 years, the Republic expanded, thriving, and the Jedi Order focused on rebuilding. People believed Sith teachings had been locked away in dusty archives and reduced to whispered warnings passed down to younglings. But they were wrong. In 4400 BBY, Freedon Nad was a gifted Jedi Knight, powerful but impatient. He found Jedi teachings limiting. They spoke of peace, patience, and restraint. Nad wanted more. He wanted power, and when he couldn't find it within the Order, he walked away from it. Alone, he chased rumors of ancient Sith knowledge, scattered across the galaxy. His search eventually led him to the jungle moon of Yavin, the same place where Naga Sado had fled centuries earlier. Among the vine-covered ruins, Nad made a shocking discovery. Sado still existed, either in suspended animation or as a lingering spirit, depending on which version you believe. The last true Dark Lord of the old Sith Empire had kept himself, preserved with the dark side, waiting for someone worthy to carry the Sith legacy forward. Sado saw potential in Nad and accepted him as an apprentice. He taught him forbidden Sith, sorcery, alchemy, dark rituals. Nad devoured everything. He learned to extend his life, forge weapons infused with dark energy, and twist others' will with Sith magic. But Sith history always repeats itself. Apprentices betray their masters. And once Nad had taken all the knowledge he could, he turned on Sado, in a confrontation that mirrored Sado's own betrayal of his master. Nad destroyed him. The last living link to the old Sith Empire was gone, but its secrets had survived past. Armed with dark knowledge and ancient artifacts, Freedon Nad looked for a place to rule. He found it in the Outer Rim, on a primitive world called Onderon. Onderon was isolated and still developing. Its people lived in a single city, Izzy, surrounded by a dangerous wilderness filled with savage beasts. To Nad, it was perfect. With little effort, he conquered the world, becoming both King of Izzy's and Dark Lord of the planet. Onderon became his personal Sith kingdom. He built a society rooted in the dark side. Citizens who obeyed him lived safely behind the city walls. Those who resisted were exiled into the beast-infested wilds. Nad ruled for over 100 years. Through Sith magic, he unnaturally extended his life, becoming a constant figure for generations of Andronians. His influence reshaped their culture. Entirely strength was celebrated, compassion dismissed, and the dark side openly worshipped. When he finally died around 4300 his body was buried beneath the royal palace of Izzy's. But he wasn't really gone. Nad's spirit lingered, strong enough in the Force to influence his descendants, who continued to rule. His bloodline, both literal and ideological, remained, turning Onderon into something new, a planet governed by a Sith cult. These nadists worshipped him as a god-king and guarded his dark teachings with religious fervor, even as the galaxy forgot about the Sith. Alderaan quietly preserved their ways. As time passed, society split. Inside the walls of Izzy's lived the loyalists, upholding the nadist traditions. Outside, in the wilderness, survivors of exile adapted. Some learned to tame and ride the flying beasts, forming their own warrior culture. The Beast Riders opposed the city's dark rulers, launching guerrilla raids and waging a slow, brutal rebellion. By around 4030 BBY, this so-called Beast War had become a permanent feature of life on Andor. Eventually, the Jedi took notice. In 4000 BBY, they sent a delegation led by Master Archegeth to investigate. At the time, Queen Aminoa ruled Izzy's. She was a direct descendant of Nad and drew openly from his lingering spirit for power. When the Beast Riders, with Jedi backing, launched a major offensive on the city, Aminoa retreated to Nad's tomb, hoping to amplify her strength. But Master Arca was prepared. Drawing on the light side, he suppressed Nad's ghostly influence. With her power source cut off, Aminoa perished. The Jedi assumed the conflict was over and the darkness on Alderaan ended. They were wrong. Aminoa's husband, King Aemon, had been hiding in the shadows, frail and confined to a life-support exoskeleton. He appeared harmless, but in truth, he had spent decades quietly studying Sith rituals, communing with Nad's spirit, and preparing for his moment. In 3998 BBY, 2 years after Aminoa's death, Ammon rose. With Nad's spirit guiding him, he led the Frida Nad uprising. His first act was brazen. He stole Nad's sarcophagus, which the Jedi had planned to relocate off-world. When Master Arca confronted him, Armin revealed his full power. Capturing the Jedi Master, the Jedi sent reinforcements, including Ulets and K. Keldroma. They staged a daring rescue. In the battle that followed, the Jedi fought both Armin and Nad's ghost, but they prevailed. Armin was defeated, and Master Arca managed to sever Nad's spirit from the world of the living, banishing him. But Nad had one final act to play before being banished. He encountered 2 visitors, Satal and Alima, Keto aristocrats from the Empress Teta system with a thirst for power. Nad passed key Sith knowledge to them, including ancient scrolls and artifacts. The Ketos returned home and founded the Krath Kulta, new dark side faction that would soon shake the galaxy. The Jedi, hoping to prevent any future Sith revival, relocated Nad's remains to the remote jungle moon of Dizun. They believed its isolation would make it impossible for future dark side followers to reach the tomb. But that plan would backfire. Soon after, another ambitious Jedi Exo, Khun, emerged. Like Nad before him, Khun was powerful and arrogant. In 3997 BBY, he abandoned the Jedi Order and began his descent into darkness. He journeyed first to Alderaan, then to Dizon, where he made contact with Nad's spirit. Nad saw Khun as a new vessel and guided him to Korriban, the ancient Sith. Homeworld Khun faced deadly trials there. Nearly crushed in a collapsing tomb, he finally gave in offering his soul to the dark side in exchange for survival. He healed, and Nad led him to Yavin 4, to the very temples Sado had built. But once again, the student outgrew the master. After learning all he could, Khun destroyed Nad's spirit entirely, just as Nad had done to Sado before him. Now fully Sith, Khun declared himself Dark Lord and founded the Brotherhood of the Sith. Meanwhile, the Krath were growing in strength. Using Sith magic, The Ketos overthrew the ruling nobility in the Empress Teta system. The Jedi sent Ulets, Keldroma, to infiltrate the cult and bring it down from within. But the plan failed. Ulets was poisoned with Sith toxins and seduced by Alama. Keto, he truly fell to the dark side. In 3996 BBY, XR, Kun sought him out. The two fought but reached a stalemate. At that moment, ancient Sith spirits appeared and anointed them as master and apprentice. Together, Kun and Ulets led a new Sith alliance, including the Krath and the Mandalorians, into full-scale war. What followed became known as the Great Sith War, or the Exar Kun War. It was the most devastating galactic conflict since the Great Hyperspace War. The Sith struck at the Jedi first, raiding their great library on Ossus, stealing holocrons and sacred texts. Kun even walked into the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, swaying apprentices to his cause and ordering them to murder their masters at the height of the war. Kun entered the Senate building on Coruscant and assassinated the Supreme Chancellor using Sith sorcery. The Republic was thrown into chaos. For a moment, it seemed the Sith might actually win, but the Sith always break from within. During a battle on Ossus, Ulets killed his own brother, K. The act of fratricide snapped something inside him. In grief, Jedi Knight Gnome Sunrider used her powers to sever Ulets' connection to the Force entirely. Powerless and ashamed, Ulet surrendered. Seeking redemption, he revealed the location of Kun's base on Yavin 4, with the Republic fleet closing in. Kun prepared a final ritual. He sacrificed all the native Massassi to separate his spirit from his body, anchoring himself to the temples of Yavin 4. As Jedi arrived, they felt the growing darkness. Led by Gnome, they formed a wall of light, combining their energy to counter Kun's ritual. A force firestorm engulfed the moon. The Jedi believed Kun was destroyed. In truth, he was trapped, his spirit bound to the ruins, waiting for the next fool to awaken him. By the end of 3996 BBY, the war was over. Kun's brotherhood was shattered. Ulets, now powerless, wandered the galaxy in search of redemption. The Krath collapsed. The Mandalorians retreated. The Jedi Order had survived, but at a terrible cost. Billions were dead. Whole worlds destroyed. The Jedi's library on Ossus was ravaged. Its star had been detonated by Sith tactics, forcing hasty evacuation. Much knowledge was saved. Much more was lost forever. And once again, the galaxy assumed the Sith were gone. But they weren't. They never are. The Sith legacy, passed from spirit to soul, from master to betrayer, continued. And in the shadows of a broken galaxy, it was already taking shape, again waiting for its moment to rise. The Jedi Civil War, sometimes the brightest. Heroes fall farther than the darkest villains ever rise. After the devastation of the Great Sith War, the galaxy was about to learn that tragic truth through the rise and fall of one man. Revan, his name would become both a beacon of salvation and a symbol of destruction. The defeat of Exar Kun. In 3996, BBY had left the Republic badly wounded. Whole systems were in ruins. The Jedi Order had lost many of its greatest minds, and the Republic Senate was struggling to keep its citizens united. With public trust shaken, systems began questioning whether the Republic could even protect them. This period of uncertainty and weakness created a vacuum, and history has shown time and again. Vacuums never stay empty for long. Around 3976 BB White, 2 decades after Exar Kun's fall, that vacuum was filled by a threat that was both old and terrifyingly new. The Mandalorians, a fierce warrior culture that had once allied with Kun, returned in force. But this time, they weren't launching random raids, they were on a focused, large-scale campaign of conquest. They targeted Republic border worlds, exploiting the weakened state of the galaxy. These Mandalorian wars began as skirmishes, but they quickly escalated under the leadership of a warrior, known as Mandalore, the Ultimate. The Mandalorians tore through the Outer Rim. Planetary defenses couldn't stop them. Millions died. Millions more became refugees. And yet, even as the galaxy cried out for help, the Jedi Council hesitated. Still reeling from past wars, they feared further involvement might destroy the Jedi Order completely. So they urged patience, meditation. Let the Republic military handle it, they said. But some Jedi couldn't stand by and watch worlds fall. One of them was a brilliant and passionate Jedi Knight named Revan. Alongside his loyal friend Alaku would later be known, as Malak Revan argued that the Jedi had a duty to act. But when the Council refused to change course, Revan made a radical decision. He would fight anyway. Revan gathered a group of like-minded Jedi who believed as he did. They broke from the Council's authority and volunteered to aid the Republic. Directly, this group became known as the Reventious, and under Reventious leadership, they joined the front lines. From the moment he arrived, everything changed. Revan was a tactical genius. He learned Mandalorian combat philosophy, then used it against them. He made hard choices, ones others couldn't, sacrificing soldiers for the sake of a larger victory, shifting strategies that pushed the limits of Jedi ideals. Over time, those choices hardened him. He stopped showing his face, wearing a distinctive mask at all times. Some said it was symbolic, he had become more idea than man. Others believed it marked the start of his fall. By 3960 BBY, the war reached its terrifying climax at Malak. There Revan sprang a trap of devastating scale. He activated a superweapon, the mass shadow generator device that unleashed immense gravitational forces. It crushed the Mandalorian fleet and a large portion of Revan's own forces, who he had deliberately sacrificed. The gamble worked. The Mandalorians were utterly broken. Revan personally defeated Mandalore, the Ultimate, in single combat, and took his mask as a trophy. The surviving Mandalorians surrendered, and their culture was left shattered to the galaxy. Revan was a hero, the one who saved the Republic when no one else would. But no one understood what Malachor had done to him. After the battle, Revan discovered the ruins of the Traius Academy, an ancient Sith site. Within its dark halls, surrounded by forbidden knowledge and artifacts, something inside Revan changed. He had already sacrificed Jedi ideals for victory. Now he began turning to the dark side, seduced by what he found. Soon after, Revan and Malak announced they were pursuing Mandalorian remnants into the unknown regions, but this was only part of the truth. Their real mission was to uncover the source of the dark whispers they had found at Malachor. What they discovered was beyond anything they imagined. The Sith Empire of Darth Vader. This empire, hidden on the storm-shrouded world of Dromond Kars, had survived in secret since the Great Hyperspace War. Vitiatin, ancient Sith Lord, overpowered Revan and Malak. Bending their minds to his will, he ordered them to find an ancient weapon, the Starforge, a space station built by the Rakata. The forge was capable of generating endless war machines, fueled by the energy of a nearby star and saturated with dark side power. Whatever remained of Revan and Malak as Jedi was stripped away, or perhaps they had already fallen long before. By 3959 BBY, Revan returned to known space, no longer a Jedi, but Darth Revan, Dark Lord of the Sith, with Darth Malak as his apprentice. With the Starforge, they built a vast armada and launched a new Sith Empire, not from the shadows, but from within the Republic itself. So began the Jedi Civil War. The Republic, still rebuilding from the Mandalorian Wars, was completely unprepared. Revan knew their defenses. He struck key hyperspace lanes, shipyards, and manufacturing worlds. He wasn't trying to burn the galaxy down, he wanted to conquer it. His war was swift, tactical, and horrifyingly effective. For the Jedi Order, the war was a nightmare. They were still recovering, and now their own Revan and Malak, once students, now monsters, led the assault. Jedi were captured, tortured, turned, entire worlds fell. And then, in 3957 BBY, something unexpected happened. During a Jedi strike on Revan's flagship, Malak saw his chance. In true Sith fashion, he betrayed his master. While Revan was fighting Jedi aboard the ship, Malak ordered his fleet to fire on the bridge. Revan was critically wounded, but a young Jedi named Bastila Shan used her battle meditation to protect her strike team and barely managed to escape with Revan's unconscious body, now presumed dead. Revan was taken to the Jedi Council, but instead of executing him or placing him on trial, they chose a third path. They wiped his memory and gave him a new identity as a Republic soldier, hoping they could use him to defeat Malak. Malak, now Dark Lord of the Sith, continued the war with unmatched brutality. Unlike Revan's precision, Malak was all destruction. He ordered the bombardment of entire planets. The war dragged on until Revan, now unaware of who he truly was, began to rediscover the truth. Over time, Revan regained his memories. With Bastila and a crew of loyal companions, he retraced his old path, uncovering secrets he had once hidden. Finally, he chose to reject his Sith past. Whether because of Jedi influence or genuine change, Revan turned against Malak in 3956. He led an assault on the Starforge. There, he faced his former apprentice in a final duel. Malak, twisted by hate and ambition, fell dying with the knowledge that Revan had ultimately made the stronger choice. With Malak dead and the Starforge destroyed in the Battle of Rakata Prime, Revan's Sith Empire collapsed. The Republic survived, but peace remained elusive. The Jedi Civil War left scars everywhere. The Jedi were nearly destroyed, with many slain or seduced to darkness. The Republic had barely survived, and among the Sith, a new chaos took root. By 3955 BBY, Sith Lords who had once served Revan and Malak turned on each other in a brutal civil war. They wiped themselves out in a frenzy of betrayal. And yet, from that bloodshed, 3 Sith rose: Darth Trier, formerly Kree, Darth Nihilus, and Darth Sion. They formed the Sith Triumvirate, truling from the Traius Academy on Malachor V. These Sith didn't fight open battles. They waged a secret war, a purge of the Jedi. Nihilus, now more hunger than man, destroyed entire worlds by draining life. He annihilated the Jedi conclave on Qatar in one horrifying act. Sion, held together by pure agony and rage, hunted Jedi across the galaxy. Antreya, the schemer, worked in the shadows to unravel the Force itself. By 3952 BBY, the Jedi Order was nearly extinct. But then came the Jedi exile, Mitra Surik, a general from the Mandalorian Wars. She had lost her Force connection out of trauma Now, she returned to face the triumvirate. With the help of her companions and her former master Makria, secretly, Triasurek hunted the Sith. She defeated Nihilus on Telos, destroyed Sion's will to live on Korriban, and finally confronted Treya on Malachor. There, they clashed in both philosophy and lightsaber combat. Surik prevailed, destroyed the Treyas Academy, and reactivated the mass shadow generator, erasing the heart of the Sith's dark legacy by 3950 BBY. The Sith triumvirate was gone. The Jedi began to rebuild, quietly and slowly. The Sith, once again, seemed defeated. But history had proven one thing: the Sith never truly die. Their ideas survive in whispers. Their teachings remain hidden in shadows. And far beyond the edges of known space, the Sith Empire of Darth Vader was still alive, waiting, growing, and preparing. For now, the galaxy could rest. But the cycle of light and dark was far from over. The resurgent Sith Empire, sometimes the most dangerous weapon, is patience. For nearly 3 centuries after the fall of the Sith triumvirate, the galaxy lived in relative peace. The Republic had rebuilt, the Jedi Order had regained its strength, and most people believed the Sith were gone. Truly gone, once and for all, but deep beyond the edges of known space. Hidden in the darkness of the unknown regions, the true Sith Empire had been waiting. This wasn't some scattered cult of fallen Jedi pretending to be Sith. These were the direct descendants of those who had fled into exile after the Great Hyperspace War over 1,300 years earlier, and at their head stood a figure who seemed immortal, Emperor Vitiate. Over more than a millennium, the Sith, under Vitiate's rule, built something monstrous in secret. On the hidden world of Drummond cars, generation after generation of Sith were born, trained, and died, all believing in one singular purpose: revenge. Revenge against the Republic that had once driven them into the shadows. Revenge against the Jedi who had nearly wiped them from existence. It was an entire civilization raised on hatred, and nurtured over 1,000 years for a single goal. While Exar Kun, Frieden, Nad, even Revan, had tried to revive Sith power, in Vitiate's eyes, they were nothing more than pale shadows of the real Empire, pretenders rising and falling while the true Sith waited. He watched them come and go without interference. Why act when they could serve as distractions, exhausting the Republic while his forces quietly grew stronger? Vitiate took the long view. What was a century or two to someone planning galactic revenge? In 3681 by, the wait was over. Without warning, the Sith Empire struck. A massive invasion force erupted from the unknown regions, catching the Republic completely off guard. Ships of unfamiliar design appeared across multiple systems all at once. Armies of Sith warriors and Imperial troops began descending on unprepared populations. The Great Galactic War had begun. Among those leading the charge was Darth Malgus, a brilliant tactician whose battle skill was matched by a ruthless strategic mind. The Sith attacks weren't random. They targeted military installations, hyperspace lanes, and planets of key strategic value, crippling the Republic's ability to respond. Early in the campaign, the Sith reclaimed Korriban, their ancient homeworld. It was a tactical victory, yes, but also a message. By taking back Korriban, the Sith were telling the galaxy that they weren't some new threat. They were the rightful heirs to a legacy stretching back thousands of years. The Republic, lulled by centuries of peace, was completely unprepared. Military readiness had declined. Defenses were outdated. Even the Jedi, though recovered from past purges, weren't ready for this kind of war. Not against an army of Sith Lords, trained and ready, striking with overwhelming force. The early years were devastating. The Republic struggled to respond. As one system after another fell, the Sith Empire pushed closer and closer to the core worlds, crushing resistance with calculated precision. But this invasion was different from previous Sith assaults. It was organized. This wasn't a rogue faction. This was a full-fledged empire, a functioning society with a military, a hierarchy, and infrastructure. The Sith legions were disciplined, their tactics coordinated, and above all, they had leadership. Emperor Vitiate ruled from his hidden throne on Drayman cars, rarely seen, even by his closest followers. He directed the war effort with chilling efficiency. By the war's midpoint, Republic morale was in collapse. The Jedi were outnumbered. The Senate was paralyzed by indecision, and it seemed only a matter of time before the Republic would fall. Then, something unexpected happened. In 3650 BBY, after decades of relentless fighting, the Sith suddenly proposed peace. The Republic, exhausted, desperate, and clinging to hope, agreed to negotiate. A peace conference was organized on Alderaan, but it was a trap. While the Republic's eyes were on Alderaan, Darth Malgus led a strike team straight to Coruscant, the Republic's capital. A small fleet of Sith warships appeared over the planet and launched an audacious attack. Their primary target, the Jedi Temple. Malgus himself led the charge through the temple's sacred halls, cutting down Jedi defenders with brutal ease. Explosives were planted throughout the temple, while fierce fighting raged within. When the charges detonated, the ancient spires of the temple, symbols of Jedi strength for millennia, collapsed into rubble. At the same time, Sith forces seized control of the Senate building and other key locations, taking the entire capital hostage. The Republic had no choice. The Treaty of Coruscant was signed in 3653 BBY. The terms were harsh. The Republic was forced to recognize the Sith Empire as a legitimate galactic power and cede control of several star systems. From the Sith's perspective, this was ultimate victory. They had succeeded where Naga had failed. They now controlled half the galaxy, and they had brought the Republic to its knees. Although the treaty marked the end of the Great Galactic War, true peace never followed. What came instead was a decade-long Cold War, an uneasy standoff full of spying, sabotage, and skirmishes that stopped just short of full-scale war. The Sith Empire used this time to consolidate. They established governments in conquered territories, built new institutions, and trained more Sith. For some citizens under Sith control, life was surprisingly stable, if harsh. The Empire demanded loyalty and punished disobedience, but allowed people to live and work if they followed the rules. Behind the scenes, Sith politics were as dangerous as ever. Lords schemed against one another for power and influence, even while presenting a united front. The Sith Code encouraged ambition and betrayal, and that tension never disappeared, not even in peacetime. Meanwhile, Vitiate remained in the shadows, his true goals a mystery, even to his inner circle. He was immortal, untouchable. Some began to question what the Emperor really wanted. Was conquest just a means to an end? As tensions rose, the Cold War began to unravel. Border conflicts escalated, proxy battles intensified, and eventually, both sides slipped back into open warfare. The Galactic War had begun. But just as both sides prepared for another prolonged conflict, something even stranger happened. A third faction appeared, In 3630 BBY, a powerful new empire emerged, the Eternal Empire of Zakua, led by an emperor named Valkorion. But the galaxy was stunned to learn that Valkorion was, in fact, Emperor Vitiate in yet another form. Somehow, Vitiate had split or transferred his consciousness into Valkorion, creating an entirely separate empire while still ruling the Sith. Whether this was a contingency plan or part of some deeper goal related to his quest for immortality is still unclear, but it forced an unprecedented outcome. The Republic and the Sith, mortal enemies for millennia, were now forced into a reluctant alliance. Together, they fought against the Eternal Empire's superior technology and endless armies. Valkyrie. Elite knights of Zakul cut down Sith and Jedi alike. Entire fleets were lost. Worlds burned. The war dragged on until a new force, known only as the Alliance, rose to challenge the Eternal Empire. Eventually, Valkorion was defeated, his empire fell, and Vitiate, in all his forms, was finally destroyed. After over 1,000 years of manipulation and warfare, the immortal Sith was gone. What followed was chaos. Without Vitiate's unifying power, the Sith Empire splintered. Multiple Sith Lords rose to claim leadership. Among them was Darth Malgus, who sought to reform the Empire and bring stability. He gained strong support and for a time brought order. But the nature of the Sith, their ambition, their rivalry, ensured that unity couldn't last. Infighting resumed, Sith turned on one another, worlds were lost to civil war. And all the while, the Republic pushed back. By around 3600, the once great Sith Empire began to fall apart. The Republic reclaimed territory, Jedi strength grew. The Sith, who had once stood on the verge of ultimate victory, had torn themselves apart. From this point forward, the idea of a united Sith Empire was effectively over. But the Sith themselves, they weren't gone, not by a long shot. In the centuries that followed, from about 3500 to 2000 BBY, Sith power continued, just no longer in the form of an empire. Isolated warlords, cults, and lone dark side users rose in various parts of the galaxy. Some threatened local systems, others quietly preserved Sith teachings, waiting for a time when they could rise again. One Sith, Darth Vader, is said to have lived without causing widespread chaos, amassing wealth, building a family, even maintaining friendships, while still mastering the dark side. Such examples were rare, but they showed that Sith traditions were evolving. Different interpretations of Sith philosophy emerged. Some still pursued conquest. Others used the dark side more subtly, manipulating through politics, economics, or the Force itself. This era of scattered Sith activity continued for centuries. Many were defeated by Jedi before gaining real power. Others lasted in secrecy, biding their time. But by around 2000 BBY, everything changed again. A Jedi Knight named Fannius, later known as Darth Ruin, abandoned the Jedi Order and began gathering followers. He had bigger dreams than the petty warlords before him. He wanted to create something greater, something lasting, and with his rise came the beginning of a new age, the next great resurgence of Sith power. The 1,000-year cycle was beginning once more. From the ashes of Vitiate's fallen empire, darkness stirred again, and the eternal war between light and dark was far from over. 1,000-year darkness, 1,000 years of darkness. That's not exaggeration, it's history. The longest, most brutal conflict the galaxy ever endured began 2,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. when a single fallen Jedi set in motion a chain of events that would plunge civilization into chaos for an entire millennium. His name was Fanius, once a respected Jedi Master. His fall to the dark side reshaped the galaxy in ways that make many other Sith Lords look like minor footnotes. When he left the Jedi Order, he took on a new name to match his ambition, Darth Ruin. What made Ruin different from the scattered Sith who had come before him was his ability to unify. He didn't simply fall, he recruited. He went out and found others, especially Jedi, who had grown disillusioned with the Order's strict rules and philosophy. His charisma and radical ideology were dangerously persuasive. Dozens of Jedi abandoned their oaths and followed him. Along with dark side adepts and Force-sensitive individuals from across the galaxy, these defectors became the core of what Ruin proudly called the New Sith Order. And around 2000 BBY, that movement exploded across the stars. This wasn't just another Sith cult or rogue faction. It was an outright revolution, a rebellion against both the Jedi and the Republic. Entire systems that resented Republic oversight joined the cause, drawn by the promise of power. Ambitious beings who had felt stifled under Jedi ideals saw in Ruin's message a way to seize what they believed was rightfully theirs. The resulting conflict would be known by many names: the New Sith Wars, the Republic Dark Age, the Jedi Sith War. But no matter what name historians use, the reality was simple. The galaxy descended into a 1,000-year nightmare of war. In the early centuries of the conflict, the Republic was caught off guard. The new Sith Empire, as Ruin's successors called it, unleashed devastating attacks. Republic worlds fell in droves. Sith armies, using both conventional weapons and dark side sorcery, swept across planets that had known only peace for generations. By around 1466 BBY, the situation was grim. The Sith had conquered nearly everything outside the galactic core. The once sprawling Republic had shrunk to a handful of systems, including Coruscant. The rest had fallen under the control of Sith warlords. This was the Sith's greatest territorial conquest in their entire history. Not even Palpatine's later empire would hold as much of the galaxy. Dozens of Sith Lords ruled their own fiefdoms. Entire sectors, like Dark Kings. Under their control, the Force was used for domination. Billions lived under Sith rule, but with that success came the Sith's eternal flaw: pride, ambition, the lust for personal power. The very traits that made them strong in war made them incapable of unity. Darth Ruin himself was eventually murdered by his own followers, a pattern that would repeat for centuries. Time and again, a powerful Sith would rise, unify factions, achieve great victories, then be betrayed. Civil wars between rival Sith Lords became frequent. Apprentices killed masters. Allies turned on each other. Even when the Republic was at its weakest, the Sith were too fractured to finish the job. Meanwhile, the Republic, battered but not broken, regrouped in the core. It rebuilt its fleets and restructured its defense. The Jedi, while fewer in number, shifted focus to quality over quantity, training knights specifically to battle Sith techniques. They studied every loss and adapted with time. By around 1050 BBY, the war had dragged on for nearly 1,000 years. Both sides were depleted. Jedi and Sith had fallen in such numbers that entire branches of knowledge were lost. The galaxy was exhausted. Entire generations had known only war. That's when a new figure emerged: Skir Khan, a fallen Jedi with a brilliant mind. He saw the problem clearly. The Sith weren't losing because they were weak. They were losing because they were divided. Khan proposed something radical: end the tradition of a single Dark Lord ruling over resentful subordinates. Instead, all Sith Lords would be equals, a brotherhood of darkness. He believed unity through shared power was the only way to finally destroy the Republic. To many, it was heresy. But Khan's charisma and logic convinced numerous Sith Lords to abandon their fiefdoms and join his cause. Others simply recognized the obvious: if they kept fighting each other, the Republic would eventually reclaim everything. Khan went even further, crowning multiple Sith as Dark Lords within the Brotherhood. This, he believed, would remove the incentive for betrayal. Everyone would share in the power. It was a democratic vision of darkness, and it worked, at least for a time. With their internal feuds set aside, the Sith once again became a serious threat. The Brotherhood launched fresh offensives. Republic worlds that had enjoyed relative peace for decades were suddenly under siege. In response, the Republic and Jedi restructured their own forces. A Jedi Master named Lord Hoth created the Army of Light, a coalition of Jedi Knights and Republic troops determined to destroy the Sith once and for all. What followed were some of the most massive Force-wielder battles in recorded history. Entire armies of Jedi and Sith clashed on worlds like Ruzan, Malrev, and Fasira. The scale of these battles dwarfed even the Great Sith Wars. Dozens of lightsabers lit up the battlefield. Force storms flattened forests. Force lightning blackened skies. Entire landscapes shattered when powerful Jedi and Sith collided. The war's final phase had begun. Casualties were catastrophic on both sides. But slowly, Lord Hoth's Army of Light began winning. He was more than a warrior, he was a tactician. System by system, he broke the Brotherhood's hold. Eventually, all paths led to one final showdown: the Seventh Battle of Ruusan. 6 prior battles had already bloodied the planet, with neither side gaining the upper hand. Now, the Brotherhood was trapped. Khan and his remaining forces were surrounded. Supplies were cut off. Victory for the Jedi seemed inevitable. Khan, now unstable from the pressure of leadership and the looming collapse of his Brotherhood, grew desperate, and somewhere in that desperation he made a fatal decision. One of the Sith in the Brotherhood, a powerful and deeply reflective warrior named Darth Bane, had come to reject Khan's entire ideology. To Bane, the Brotherhood was a mistake. He believed that the Sith should follow the ancient principle: only to a master and an apprentice. Power should be concentrated, not shared. The Brotherhood, in his eyes, was weak. Bane also believed that, after 1,000 years of failure, it was time for a new approach. The Sith could not destroy the Republic through brute force. A more subtle, long-term strategy was needed, and so Bane subtly manipulated Khan toward a final act of destruction, one that would wipe out both the Jedi and the Sith. He reminded Khan of an ancient Sith weapon, the thought bomb, a creation of dark side alchemy that could annihilate all Force-sensitive beings in its range, trapping their souls in eternal torment. Khan, seeing no other option, embraced it. In 1000 BBY, the Brotherhood gathered in underground caverns on Ruusan. There, nearly 100 Sith Lords pooled their power to create the thought bomb. Lord Hoth, realizing the danger, led a Jedi strike team into the caves to stop them. The weapon detonated. The blast annihilated every Force-sensitive within its reach. Khan, the Brotherhood, Lord Hoth, his Jedi all perished in an instant. Worse, their souls were trapped in the ruins of Ruzan, bound to the world in an unending limbo. Just as Darth Bane had planned, he had stayed far from the blast zone, ensuring his survival. With every other Sith now dead, Bane alone remained, and with him a new vision, a new Sith legacy was born. From the Republic's perspective, the Sith threat had been eliminated. The Jedi, though mourning Lord Horth, believed they had finally won. 1,000 years of war had ended, but the cost was immense. Entire worlds had been ruined, billions had died. Ancient knowledge had been lost. The Republic itself had shrunk, its influence and resources greatly diminished. In the aftermath, major reforms took place. The Rusan Reformation completely reorganized. The Republic, the Supreme Chancellor's power was reduced. The Senate gained more control. The Republic's military was downsized, and responsibility for defense was handed over to individual sectors. The Jedi also changed. With the Sith seemingly gone, they stepped back from warfare and returned to their roots as peacekeepers. All training was centralized on Coruscant. The lightsaber was de-emphasized. The focus shifted back to diplomacy and meditation, but both the Jedi and the Republic made one tragic assumption, that the Sith were extinct. They weren't. Darth Bane had survived, and from the shadows he began rebuilding. No more grand armies, no more empires. From now on, the Sith would work in secret, hidden, patient, quietly gathering power and passing it on from master to apprentice. The new Sith wars were over. But the Sith had not been destroyed. They had simply evolved, and in the centuries to come, they would rise again, far more dangerous than ever before. The galaxy thought it had won, but in truth, the Sith's greatest victory was yet to come. Rule. Of two, sometimes victory demands defeat. Sometimes survival requires death, and sometimes the path to ultimate power begins with accepting weakness. That paradox lies at the heart of the most radical transformation in Sith history, a change that would eventually bring them closer to galactic domination than 1,000 years of open war ever could dot in the smoking ruins of Rusen, as the Republic celebrated what they believed to be the final extinction of the Sith. One figure watched silently from the shadows. Darth Bane, the sole survivor of the Brotherhood of Darkness, stood alone. The Jedi swept the battlefields, confirming their ancient enemies were gone. But Bane knew what they didn't. The Sith's greatest enemy had always been the Sith themselves. Over and over again in their long history, the Sith had clawed their way to the brink of victory, only to destroy themselves. Naga Sado's invasion failed in part due to Ludo Kresh's sabotage. Exar Kun's Brotherhood of the Sith crumbled after betrayals within. Darth Revan was struck down by his own apprentice, Malak, and the new Sith Wars had disintegrated into centuries of Sith fighting Sith. While the Republic slowly rebuilt, Bane saw a pattern. Others saw chaos. The problem wasn't bad luck. It was the Sith structure itself. Too many lords, too many egos, too many conflicting agendas. The Sith weren't undone by Jedi lightsabers. They were undone by their own ambition. Around 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, Bane made a decision that would reshape galactic history. He created the Rule of Two. From that moment on, there would be only two Sith at any time, a master to embody power, and an apprentice to crave it. This solved several problems at once. With only two Sith, secrecy became their shield. The Jedi would never sense them. They could operate from the shadows, unseen and unnoticed. And perhaps, most important of all, their power would be distilled, concentrated across generations. Under Bane's new rule, the master would train their apprentice fully. The apprentice would learn everything, and when strong enough, they would challenge and kill their master, taking their place. They would then choose an apprentice of their own, continuing the cycle. It was brutal, but it ensured strength. It ensured that every generation of Sith would be stronger than the one before. Weakness would be eliminated. Knowledge would accumulate. And most of all, patience would replace reckless ambition. To begin this new path, Bane chose a young girl named Zana, a Force-sensitive orphan found amid the chaos of Rusan. She became Darth Zana, his first apprentice. Bane trained her relentlessly, teaching not just Sith techniques, but a new way of thinking. No more wars, no more empires. The Sith would take the galaxy from within through politics, corruption, and manipulation as the Republic and Jedi declared victory and restructured for peace. The Sith were quietly reborn underground. Their mission wouldn't take years. It would take centuries. For the next 1,000 years, the Sith stayed hidden. Every master trained one apprentice. When the apprentice became stronger, they killed the master and took their place. This line remained unbroken. Around 980 BBY, Zana proved Bane's system worked. After years of training, she turned on her master and defeated him. Some records say she killed him outright. Others suggest Bane tried to transfer his consciousness into her body, and she resisted. Whatever the truth, Zana became the new master. She took her own apprentice and continued the line. Next came Darth Cognis, also known as the Huntress, a non-human Sith with an extraordinary ability to track and kill. She had once served Zana and eventually claimed the mantle herself. One apprentice after another followed, all continuing Bane's vision. Much of what happened during this era remains buried. The Sith left few traces on purpose. Bane taught that secrecy was their greatest weapon. The Jedi couldn't fight an enemy they didn't know existed. The Republic wouldn't defend against a threat it thought was extinct. Still, fragments of this hidden lineage survive. Around 500 BBY, a three-eyed mutant named Darth Millennial trained under Darth Cognis, but he rejected the rule of two, calling it too limiting. He broke away and founded the Prophets of the Dark Side on Drummond cars. They focused on divination and foresight rather than conquest, preserving Sith knowledge, but straying from Bane's path. Another infamous figure was Darth Gravid, who lived around the same time. Gravid believed he could merge Sith and Jedi philosophy into a balanced approach to the Force. This delusion led him to destroy large portions of the Sith archives. His apprentice, Darth Geen, was forced to kill him, but not before Gravid's destruction did permanent damage to their preserved knowledge. Then there was Darth Vectivus, one of the strangest Sith of all. He began as a business administrator at a mining facility, discovered his Force sensitivity, and pursued Sith teachings while still managing his company. Unusually, Vectivus lived peacefully. He became wealthy through legitimate business, kept friendships and family, and even died of natural causes, a Sith anomaly. His life proved that even within the strict rule of two, interpretations varied wildly. Most Sith, however, stayed in the shadows, building influence through politics, finance, and criminal networks. They used agents and pawns who never even knew their true allegiance. Meanwhile, the Jedi grew complacent. They believed the Sith were gone. But as the final century before Yavin approached, the Banned Sith were preparing to end their 1,000-year plan. The line had reached Darth Tenebrous, a Bith with extraordinary analytical skills. He trained an apprentice named Darth Plagueis, a moon, a species known for their mastery of finance and business. Plagueis would become one of the most important Sith in the entire lineage. Where others focused on conquest or brute power, Plagueis became obsessed with the nature of the Force itself. He experimented with midichlorians, microscopic life forms that allowed beings to connect with the Force. In an effort to create life and achieve immortality, Plagueis blended Sith sorcery with scientific rigor, charting new territory in Force manipulation. But he never forgot the political side of the Sith grand plan. He embedded himself in the intergalactic banking clan, using wealth and economic influence to subtly destabilize the Republic, creating problems only the Sith could solve. That around 100 BBY, Plagueis began searching for an apprentice who could help him bring Bane's plan to its final stage. He needed someone ruthless, brilliant, and patient, someone who could manipulate the Republic from the inside. He found him on Naboo, a young noble named Sheev Palpatine. The boy showed immense force, potential, and an unmatched thirst for power. Plagueis nurtured him quietly, teaching him Sith philosophy, testing his resolve. The final test came around 65 BBY. Under Plagueis' guidance, Palpatine murdered his entire family, fully embracing the dark side. Plagueis was satisfied. He made Palpatine his apprentice, Darth Sidious. For decades, the two worked together. Plagueis continued his experiments and expanded his influence in finance. Sidious climbed the political ladder, rising in the Republic Senate. Unusually for Sith, they didn't plot against each other right away. Sidious saw Plagueis' value and played the long game. Plagueis taught Sidious everything, even the secrets of midichlorian manipulation. Some believe he succeeded in using the Force to create life itself, possibly explaining Anakin Skywalker's mysterious birth. This theory remains hotly debated among historians, but as always, ambition outpaced loyalty. Sidious began developing plans of his own, some of which he kept secret. In the shadows, he found a Zabrok child, a living weapon, and began training him as a Sith assassin. His name was Moldot by 32. Sidious had become Senator of Naboo. The Sith grand plan was reaching its final phase. But on the eve of their shared triumph, Sidious made his move. Plagueis, intoxicated after celebrating their success, was caught off guard. Sidious struck with force, lightning, and killed him in his sleep. No duel, no confrontation, just a clean betrayal the Sith way. With Plagueis dead, Darth Sidious became the Sith Master, the culmination of Bane's 1,000-year vision. He formally took Maul as his apprentice, though Maul would be just the first of several. The rule of two had done its job. From Bane to Sidious, the Sith had transformed from warring brutes into refined, methodical masterminds. They no longer fought the Republic from the outside, they infiltrated it from within. And Sidious, now both Sith Master and Senator, was preparing to unleash the next stage of his plan. The Jedi had no idea. Yes, the Sith had died at Rusan, just as the history books said. But what replaced them was something far more dangerous. The architects of the Republic's downfall were already in place, hidden behind friendly smiles and political robes. The 1,000-year game was entering its endgame, from warriors to shadows, from conquerors to conspirators. Now, the Sith would step into the light, not as enemies of the Republic, but as its saviors. The greatest deception in galactic history was about to begin, a testament to the brilliance of Darth Bane's vision. The rule of two had done what 1,000 years of open war could not. It had turned the Sith into the very architects of the Jedi's destruction, and no one saw it coming. Sidious' grand plan, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled, was convincing the world he didn't exist. For 1,000 years, the Sith stayed hidden, carefully planning, manipulating, and building toward the moment they would reveal themselves. But when that day came, they didn't show up as conquerors. They emerged as saviors. In 32 BBY 32, years before the Battle of Yavin, the 1,000-year game, initiated by Darth Bane, entered its final phase. After centuries of subtle moves, patient scheming, and perfectly placed manipulations, the Sith were ready to re-emerge in galactic history. Darth Sidious, publicly known as Senator Palpatine of Naboo, was ready to execute the final steps of the grand plan. Unlike the Sith Lords who came before him, those who tried and failed to conquer the Republic with brute force, Sidious understood something vital. True power didn't come from domination through violence. It came from the inside. The Republic would not be overthrown. It would willingly transform itself into the very thing the Sith had always dreamed of, an empire. The key to it all was a manufactured crisis, one so urgent and terrifying that people would beg for order and control. The first act of this master strategy was the Naboo crisis. Sidious manipulated the Trade Federation, a powerful commercial entity with its own army, into blockading his homeworld. Naboo, he used their fear and greed, convincing them that a blockade would pressure the Republic into making concessions in their favor. Disguised as the mysterious Sith Lord Darth Sidious, he issued orders via encrypted holograms. Meanwhile, as Senator Palpatine, he publicly acted as the concerned politician, trying and failing to get the Republic to intervene. But when the blockade turned into a full invasion, with battle droids seizing the surface of Naboo, Sidious got exactly what he wanted. The Republic looked weak. The Chancellor, Finis Valorum, looked ineffective. And Naboo, isolated and suffering, became the emotional heart of a galaxy growing restless. In the middle of all this, Queen Padme Amidala escaped her occupied planet and brought the issue to the Galactic Senate, further highlighting the Republic's inaction. Palpatine quietly encouraged a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum. It worked. Valorum was removed, and with sympathy flooding in for Naboo, the charismatic Palpatine was elected as the new Supreme Chancellor. But Sidious wasn't finished. Two Jedi, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, had been sent to protect Queen Amidala and investigate the crisis. This couldn't be allowed to interfere. Sidious dispatched his apprentice, Darth Maul, to eliminate them. On Naboo, Maul fought the Jedi in a fierce lightsaber duel. He killed Qui-Gon, but Obi-Wan ultimately struck Maul down, slicing him in half and sending him into the depths of a reactor shaft. Even with that setback, everything was going according to Sidious' plan. Queen Amidala's people, alongside the native Gungans, retook Naboo. The crisis passed, but in its wake, Palpatine rose to power. A Sith Lord was now leading the Republic, and no one suspected a thing. The Jedi didn't realize the danger. They assumed Maul was the long-lost return of the Sith, but they had no idea the true master was sitting at the highest level of government, with Maul presumed dead. Sidious needed a new apprentice. He found one in Count Dooku, a former Jedi master from a noble family, disillusioned with the Jedi Order and disgusted by the Republic's corruption. Dooku had legitimate grievances, and after the death of his former Padawan, Qui-Gon Jinn, his disillusionment deepened. Not long after leaving the Jedi Order, Dooku fell under Sidious' influence. Sometime between 32 and 24 BY, he became Darth Tyrannus, as both the Sith Lord and Count of Sereno, Dooku had the perfect combination of credibility, influence, and ability for what came next. His first major task was to create a secessionist movement. Using his political charisma and connections, Dooku gathered discontented Outer Rim worlds, corporate guilds, and aristocratic factions. His message was clear. The Republic was broken, corrupt, and too core-centric, systems that felt ignored. For decades, listened and joined him. At the same time, another crucial piece of the puzzle was falling into place. Dooku worked with Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas, who foresaw a coming conflict and secretly commissioned a clone army from the cloners. On Kamino, after Sifo-Dyas was eliminated, likely by Dooku, the project continued in secret. Dooku chose Jango Fett as the genetic template for the clones and ensured a hidden command protocol was implanted in them. Order 66. Order 66 was a kill switch, a behavioral directive buried so deep in the clone troopers' minds that they wouldn't even know it was there. When activated, they would turn on their Jedi commanders instantly and without hesitation. Over the next decade, these plans evolved in parallel. The Republic's clone army quietly grew on Kamino, while Dooku's separatist movement gained momentum. Meanwhile, Palpatine continued consolidating power, slowly being granted more and more emergency authority to deal with the growing crisis. By 22 BBY, it was time for the next stage. The Confederacy of Independent Systems, Dooku's separatists, formally broke from the Republic. Their growing droid army, backed by groups like the Trade Federation and Techno Union, posed an immediate threat. The Republic had no standing army to counter them until the existence of the clone army was discovered.